Hey Internet, it's been a while. I wanted to talk about some of the most recent entries in the MCU. But before I do that, let me apologize in advance if I am sweaty. I'm a fat guy during a worldwide heat wave, so, it's inevitable.
I am inevitable.
But yeah, the MCU. My first overall complaint before I dive into specifics, and I probably shouldn't start on a complaint, but here we are. Everything feels really disjointed. Building up to Endgame and just the whole Infinity Saga, you really could tell that they were tying things together. Ever since the Easter egg in the ending of, I think it was Hulk where it came first, where we saw Iron Man show up, and then later on in Iron Man 2 we got Fury. But you knew that things were interconnected, you knew that they were building towards something, there was a clear future for the franchise, and it was a big exciting thing. And ever since then, we've seen more and more characters crossing over and appearing in each other's movies. We got things like Civil War, and just, it was a really cool, big, epic experience. And now that that's finished, starting with, Spider-Man No Way Home and everything after that, it's just not been that. When the Eternals happens, a giant living being burst out of the core of the earth, and it was never mentioned in any of the movies that have happened since. And there were a ton of events that should have acknowledged that and didn't. And there's tons of times where heroes that no other heroes still have their own adventure and don't call them in. There's so much going on that it doesn't make sense for them to not reference the other things going on in the universe. If each of these heroes is having a potentially world-ending encounter with whatever the villain of their movie is, the other heroes should be involved. And it just, I don't know. I'm sure they have a plan, I'm sure they're building towards something. It just feels like a weird step back after all the involved and interconnected storylines of the Infinity Saga. But I will jump into specific things just to speak on that one. The first being Ms. Marvel. Now, if you saw my earlier video, you knew that my biggest hesitation was that they changed her powers. I still hate that. I hate it more and more as the show went on, and when I got to the finale, I still hated it. I never came around. At one point in the last episode, they tried to even reference her comic powers by having her say, "Embiggen." Hello, doggy. I have a dog now, by the way, who's off camera and you can't see her anyway, but she's here. But they said the word "Embiggen" as she reached out with her weird crystal manifestation energy thing to try and grab a car and keep it from crushing folks. And that's cool, but that's not what her powers are. In the comics, when she says "Embiggen," she's enlarging and stretching out her body, similar to Mr. Fantastic. I don't know why they changed it. I know why, because they wanted it to be linked to the bangle, so they could link it to the grandmother and dive into her Pakistani heritage, and that's cool. I love that they did that. I do like that they're getting that extra representation, and that they're just kind of broadening the scope of the MCU to include people that aren't just your standard straight white dudes. That's great. I'm all for that, and that's why I liked the hero in the comics, because it was a unique character with a unique background and it's a unique story. Even in the comics, it was very focused on her dynamic with her mother and her wanting to be the superhero like the other American superheroes that she sees and when she joins the Avengers and all that, but she still wants to maintain who she is. She still has a great familial interaction with her mother. She's still true to her faith and her upbringing and her community, and that's really cool. And that part of the show, they did great. So I guess I understand why they made the change, just to better bring that to the screen, but I still don't like the change. To me, it feels unnecessary, and unfortunately, there's a ton more changes, and they do too. Another thing is her origin in here, through most of the series, is that she's a djinn, which could potentially be racist. I'm not in a position to say because I'm just a white guy. None of it means anything to me. But just some of the, traditional associations of the word could be seen as at least stereotypical. I don't want to jump straight to the race card, but it was an odd direction for them to go. Especially because in comics, she's an Inhuman, and we already got the Inhuman series. I know that they don't consider it canon for whatever reason. I actually thought it was pretty good, but apparently a lot of people didn't, so they discount that show entirely. Although we did see Black Bolt and Doctor Strange, that was cool. But she could have been an Inhuman. They have to introduce, that side of Marvel Comics eventually anyway, but they didn't. She's a Djinn, so whatever, we'll just roll with that. And you find out that the Djinn actually has this whole, I don't want to say race, but this whole group of people that basically came from another dimension, and they're all Djinns as well, and they got trapped here, and they're trying to get home, and to do so, they need the bangle that's giving Miss Marvel her powers, and it's just a whole thing. And then at one point there's time travel, where she goes back and saves her own grandmother, and it's just, there's a lot of weird elements here that were never in the comics, and they're just strange deviations. Again, I get the story that they're trying to tell, I get the representation that they want to have and what they're trying to do, I understand why it's there, I just wish it wasn't, because I feel like they could tell the same stories and get the same point across without doing that. So those are my major complaints, really. But other than that, I will say, like I said before, the acting is incredible, the casting was really good. Some of the characters, mainly like her friend, who was Turkish in the comics, is, I'm not sure of her nationality. I believe she said it in the show, but I don't remember it, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm not going to speak on it. But she's not Turkish. But the actor that plays her does a great job. The other best friend, who's a genius, which, by the way, there are a lot of geniuses in the MCU. Like, everyone in the MCU is a genius for some reason. I mean, Spider-Man, all of them, they're all geniuses, and Iron Man, of course, and then Bruce, and Rocket, and just everyone seems to be an absolute genius. It's crazy how many there are. Like, if you look at the real world, we don't have that many super genius level people. I mean, engineers that can MacGyver a paperclip into a working set of flying armor. But tangent aside, the actors that play everyone in the show, really good. I enjoyed it a lot. Even though they did change her powers to where she's almost an entirely different hero, I enjoyed the story that they told. I enjoyed the character that I watched. I just didn't necessarily think of it as Miss Marvel, aside from when they call her that in the very, very end. And of course, there was a cameo from Captain Marvel. Yes, that's a spoiler, but I mean, if you're watching this, you should expect them. And also, it's not much of a spoiler, because if you're familiar with the character at all, and even if you watch the show, she fangirls out about Captain Marvel all the time. She's basically obsessed with her. And they've already announced that Miss Marvel is going to be in The Marvels, which was already announced. So having Captain Marvel show up at the end, not really a surprise to anyone that's been paying even the tiniest amount of attention. So I guess that broke what I said earlier about things feeling interconnected. But still, I don't know. Overall, there were some elements of the show I really liked, but it was just so different from the comics that kept taking me out of it. If this was just a new hero that they just created for the MCU and decided, you know what, we've done enough with the MCU, we've varied enough from the comics, and we've changed enough things that we're just going to go our own direction and add new heroes, then I would have loved this hero, because it's a fun story, that's well acted, and everything looked really good, and I did enjoy a lot of it. I liked how every time she was having a text conversation, instead of just doing the text overlay on the screen, which is boring and overdone, they kept working it into the background in graffiti or neon signs or whatever the case was. It was a nice touch. It was a great way to change things up. It looked really cool. There's just a lot of little things like that I really enjoyed in this show. And I think all the hate the show got early on because people were mad that, a brown girl is in a Marvel show, because God forbid. Those people are dumb, and the show was great. So I hope that some of those people eventually gave it a shot, because it really was a worthwhile watch. I just wish they could have done it without changing so much. But I will move on to an even newer entry in the MCU, which is the new Thor. It took me an extra week to see it, so I stayed away from all reviews and any online write-ups and any complaints that people had. I knew nothing going in. I didn't even see the most recent trailer, so I just went in blind and watched the movie. And again, this is one where I was really surprised they didn't tie the movie in to anything. Anything that's happened at all. I mean, the Guardians are there for a short bit in the beginning, but they had to be. When they left in Endgame, he was with them. So you can't pick up from them not being there. That would be really weird. But they're only there very briefly, and then they disappear. And then that's it. There's no other crossovers with anything or acknowledgement of anything anywhere. It was odd. Even when they had the perfect opportunity to tie into recent stuff. When they go to basically the party of the gods that Zeus is hosting, and it's just every god everywhere from all the religions and all the things. I'm pretty sure Jesus was there, which was a fun little Easter egg if that was what they meant, because they reference off-screen, they never pan to it, but they point to, oh, that's the god of carpentry. And that would have been hysterical if they did pan over and it was Jesus. I would have killed for that Easter egg. But they didn't do that. But in this Hall of the Gods, the two gods that you don't see that I really expected to would have been Khonshu and the thick hippo lady that I forget the name of, but the entire furry fandom is obsessed with, or at least was when the show was still happening. But why weren't they there? This was the perfect time to tie them in. Those are, in fact, gods. You're in the Hall of the Gods. They didn't even have to be speaking roles. It didn't even have to be a focus. You could have just had them seated somewhere and had the camera pan past them. So even if they didn't have time at the time of filming this to, sync things up with Moon Knight and do all that, there's no reason they couldn't have just CGI'd those characters in there somewhere. They fit in so many other things that it's really weird not to see them. So that was strange to me. I felt like that was a missed opportunity. Other than that, though, I don't think I have any complaints about the movie. Actually, I do have one. It's kind of minor, but it's one I brought up with my friend when I saw the movie, and that's that Stormbreaker being like the jealous girlfriend and just completely sentient. That was weird for me. When Thor would reference Mjolnir and how he was kind of annoyed that Jane Foster now had Mjolnir and he was wondering if he was worthy or not still. Stormbreaker would just float in from off screen and I guess stare at him. That was weird. I didn't like that. I don't like anthropomorphizing an axe. It was just strange to me. Everything else in the movie worked. I loved the humor. I know I've since seen a couple reviews or breakdowns. I saw the Honest trailer and that kind of stuff. And I don't understand the issues. People say there's too much Marvel humor. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of Marvel humor. And it is a problem in the MCU that every character everywhere is just the most witty person in the world. Everyone always has a quip ready and delivers it perfectly, and it's just not how humans go. For normal humans, with your interactions with other humans, at least half of the quips you make or the references you make or whatever don't land. People stutter over words. They say or or they repeat a syllable. They say they or the multiple times in a sentence. I've done half these things in this video. It's just, that's how people talk. So to see everyone constantly be hysterical and deliver everything perfectly with no hesitation, it's just weird. But it doesn't take you out of the movies, I don't feel like. I feel like this part of the appeal. It is a fantasy after all. Superheroes don't really exist. So there has to be some suspension of disbelief. And I can easily suspend my disbelief that everyone is funny. So the humor didn't bother me. The screaming goats, friggin' hysterical. A lot of things Jane Foster did, where she's a superhero but not really. She's kind of still trying to figure it out. So she's testing out her ridiculous catchphrases and those kinds of things. I thought that was really funny and also a bit realistic because let's be honest, if one of us got superpowers and tried to become a superhero, we would try to do the Spider-Man thing where we were quippy and always had a thing to say. I don't know why I chose Spider-Man and not Mr. Freeze for that example, because that's the most memorable one. But we would all do that. We would. And so to see her do it and then kind of fail at doing it, that was really funny. A lot of the things people complained about, I loved. I thought it was great. Korg, once again, funny as always. The little thing with Dwayne, his boyfriend, who's made of rock, mwah, fucking amazing. I hope he said a line in the movie, and I didn't quite catch it because the theater was loud at that point. But I hope that the speaking voice for Dwayne the Rock Monster was, of course, Dwayne the Rock Johnson. I don't know if it was. I really hope it was. I really hope Marvel did that. It would just... It would be too perfect not to do that. That's clearly the reference they're going for. They should have casted him if they didn't. But either way, that was hysterical. But for as much as people complained about the movie being too funny, when things needed to be serious, they were. The one scene that really comes to mind, aside from Jane's death at the end, spoilers all around, by the way, but there's a part where Gore has them in the Shadow Dimension. Everything's in black and white. And he's got Thor lashed up with these little tentacle things, and he's, stuck. And then he pulls in Valkyrie, and he talks to her, almost taunting her about how she lost everything, all her sisters and everyone she loved and cared about, and the gods basically, forsook. I don't know. The gods let her down, and everyone died, and it's awful. And then he just casts her out into an abyss, basically, and she just disappears from the screen into blackness. And then he brings Jane Foster in, and he's about to taunt her for being the superhero type thing too. Then he realizes that she's dying. And it's a very heavy scene, and he's really kind of evil there. I mean, it's another Marvel movie where they set the villain up to not 100% be a villain. It's supposed to be more of a sympathetic character, but at that moment, he almost seems to be gleeful in the way he's being mean. And they didn't work any humor into that scene. Between the lighting and the tone and his delivery, it was eerie. It was downright creepy, almost. Like it could have been a scene out of a horror movie. It was incredibly well done and well shot and well acted, and there was no humor destroying the mood. So, for as much as people don't like the humor, it was only in places where it belonged. They never tried to destroy an impactful scene by shoehorning humor into it. Something that other movies, like Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, seem to do a little too often. Sometimes when you have a good scene that really kind of hits you, you don't need to cut to a joke right away. You need to let it linger. You need to let the audience feel things. I know that comic books originally, including the ones these movies are based off of, were targeted toward, children and teenagers. But the people watching these movies are the people that were children and teenagers when those comics came out. A lot of us now are in our 20s, 30s, 40s, possibly even older. So you don't need to dumb everything down. You don't need to squash every emotion. We're allowed to feel things. As a director, that's your job, to make us feel things. So I feel like here they did a great job at doing that. They let you feel the feelings when you need to, and they let it be just funny or mindless action in the other scenes when that's really all you expect from a superhero movie. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot. And then the end of the movie wasn't quite the CGI same versus same that you expect out of Marvel, which is awesome. I loved that. Actually, at the very end of it, the villain didn't as much feel like the main antagonist, so much as Jane Foster's struggle with the cancer that's killing her, and her decision to let it kill her so she can save Thor. Basically, her cancer is the villain of the movie. Gore is just a secondary antagonist. But it was all really well done. It was a really good movie. I did thoroughly enjoy it. So if you're watching this and don't mind the fact that I already spoiled the movie for you and you haven't seen the new Thor, definitely go watch it. You will enjoy it. Also, the soundtrack is mostly Guns N' Roses, and that was pretty badass. Thoroughly enjoyed the hell out of that. So, yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, MCU is still entertaining. I like a lot of things they've put out. I don't think I talked about Doctor Strange at all before, so I'll just briefly talk about that one. I thought it was good. It was fun for what it was. I was disappointed that they didn't actually explore the multiverse more, considering it's in the title of the movie. I thought we'd see a lot more different universes, a lot more different iterations of the heroes we've seen before, instead of the no iterations of any of the heroes we've seen before. So that was a bit disappointing. I really feel like that could have been more. If anything, they could have made the movie longer to accommodate a little bit more just playing around with the universes, Let's see the Tom Cruise as Iron Man that was originally going to happen and then didn't. Let's see some of the X-Men characters show up. This would have been the perfect time to introduce Deadpool, which a lot of people thought was going to happen anyway. There were so many other directions they could have went with the multiverse in play, and they didn't, and that was a little disappointing. But other than that, I actually thought the movie was really fun. Some people were annoyed by like the big music fight. I thought that was really cool. I thought it kind of looked cool. I love classical music, so the soundtrack during that fight was really fun for me. Like, I enjoyed that scene. I enjoyed a lot of the scenes. I thought the Zombie Strange was done really, really well. Just the way all his movements were kind of jerky and zombie-ish, even when he talked. Plus the big gash in his face looked amazing. So overall, it was a good movie. It was well done. It was weird that they repeated Scarlet Witch's character development from her show. She basically relearned the exact same thing she learned in that show, and that's that she can't sacrifice other people's lives just for her selfish desire to have her family. I don't know why everything she learned disappeared and she had to learn it again. But it worked. It was good. I enjoyed it. You probably will too. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. Just kind of my update on my feelings of the MCU for the nobody that cares. And of course, Hulk is coming soon. She-Hulk, rather. Kind of on the fence about that one. In the comics, she's basically Deadpool, but green and with boobs. She breaks the fourth wall a lot. It very heavily relies on comedy. It's very meta. It's a ridiculous comic, and it's fun. And the trailers, aside from having just awful animation quality, don't appear to have any of that comedy or meta. And I don't think they're going to go meta with this character or any character in the MCU until we get Deadpool. And even when Deadpool does it, they'll probably keep that restrained to just his own movies, or maybe like a post-credit scene, but I doubt they'll let him break the fourth wall in the middle of the next team-up film. So I don't expect that in She-Hulk, but it would be nice if they teased some of the comedy, if they showed the character to be funny at all. So I don't know how I feel about that. I think I'm way more excited about the confirmed season 4 of Daredevil, or the fact that Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio are reprising their roles in Echo. That's really cool. And I hope that means that because we're getting those characters back, that we'll also get Punisher and Jessica Jones, because they were both amazing. The only issue is Disney needs to let those be R-rated. They need to not water down every character to shoehorn them into the PG-13 MCU. It's bad enough, I'm pretty sure Blade is going to be watered down, and that's ridiculous for that character. He needs to be rated R just as much as a Punisher, or even probably Wolverine, Ghost Rider. There's a number of characters that just, because of the themes and the character themselves and how things progress through their stories, they need to be rated R. The stuff they deal with and the way they talk, it doesn't work if you try to childify everything, and you don't need to. Disney needs to realize that not everything they own, now that they own everything, needs to have the Disney approach of appealing to little children. You can let some of the movies about violent, murderous superheroes be for adults. It's okay to make adult movies. That's what movies do. I don't actually know if Disney knows this, but children don't have money. Adults are the ones that make the decisions on how to spend the money. Some adults might decide to placate their children and pay for a children's movie because they want the little gremlins to shut up for 2 hours. But at the end of the day, the adults still get to make the choice. So if you give them things that appeal to them, especially now that a lot of movies go to streaming and you can watch it from the comfort of your own home and don't have to worry about babysitters and theaters and all of that, adults are going to pay for the things that appeal to them. So make movies for them. But now for the second time, I'm going to stop talking. This is already like a 25-minute video, and I don't really have anything to edit out, so it's just going to be a long-ass video. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I am working on actual game-related videos, because sometimes it feels like this channel doesn't actually have game-related videos anymore. It's just those are harder to film, because I have to capture game footage, and my capture card sucks, and so does the laptop I use to run it, and it's just an absolute mess and a nightmare to edit. Whereas this, I talk at a camera for 25 minutes, I put it in Final Cut, I render it all pretty, and then poof, video. So yeah, that's it. See you later. I'm gonna go give that dog attention before she poops somewhere she shouldn't. Bye!